All right, everyone. So here we have part 4 of Totally Not Mark's 100% Blind Naruto review. And this one is going to be covering the Sasuke retrieval arc, which is still considered by a lot of people to be one of the best arcs in all of Naruto. Maybe not their personal best, although it is for me. For me, the Sasuke retrieval arc is still my favorite arc in all of Naruto. I absolutely love it to this day. And I'm interested to know what your favorite arc is. So let me know in the comment section down below, which arc in Naruto is your favorite out of all of them? Is it the Land of Waves, Chunin Exams, Konoha Crush, Search for Tsunade, or is it the Sasuke retrieval arc? Or maybe you have another one. Maybe it's the Pain Invasion arc, or the versus Itachi and versus Pain arc, or who knows, maybe some of you think that the War arc is the best. I'm sure there's someone out there who thinks the War arc is the best arc in Naruto. Whatever it is, let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're here, guys, consider leaving a like, sharing this video, and subscribing if you haven't. And if you are subscribed, just check to make sure you're still subscribed, because YouTube is apparently still doing this thing where they're unsubscribing people without their notice. So just check to make sure you're still subscribed. And if you are, consider or remember to click on the bell icon to be notified whenever I post a new video. All right, let's go ahead and watch this video.
This video is sponsored by
Raycon.
As you guys know, I'm doing these reviews completely blind.
What?
And so, all I see when I look at my bookshelf is a clear delineation between two colors, white and black. These obviously represent two separate parts of Naruto, and because I only had one arc left in the white section, I was interested to see just how Kishimoto would end this part of the story. And I'm gonna be honest, I also looked at this last arc, and instead of seeing just a story, I saw 8 full volumes for me to finish reading before I could begin writing this video. However, once I finished this arc, I noticed something. Something I had harshly criticized this story for not having has now become one of its strongest attributes. Today, I want to share with you all my first impressions and review for the final arc of original Naruto, and what an arc it is.
Okay, I can hear the music about to start. Sorry guys, you guys know I can't take any risks. So
I looked on with concern at the 8 full volumes of manga I had to read and review this week. Well, what an idiot I was. The material in these volumes are easily some of the most simple in terms of story, but also have, I think, the very best paneling and layout work from Kishimoto that I've seen yet, making the entire process of reading deceptively quick and seamless. I'm telling you, I was slamming volumes like pints at Christmas. Often when it comes to the artists behind these famous mangas, the development or change of their respective artistic approaches, styles, occurs unconsciously and gradually over time. JoJo, Dragon Ball, and One Piece are clear and striking examples of this phenomenon. Comparing their work from the beginning of their run to their most recent stuff highlights my point. Natural changes occur. And while some of this can explain part of what's happened to Kishimoto's work here as a mangaka, I think there's also a very conscious effort being exerted here. In the beginning of volume 20, Kishimoto vents his frustrations with the manga format, drawing from top right to bottom left, calling it limiting. And this frustration can be felt in the volumes concerning this section specifically, sporting gorgeous pages and panels that really grab my attention, the likes of which I haven't seen much from Kishimoto at all.
I mean, I can understand that. I mean, you know, because when you're going into a manga, you know that people are so used to reading it a certain way, so you have to structure your work to accommodate that. You know, you have to make sure that everything goes from one direction, or everything starts at one point and then it ends at one point, and so you have to make sure you lay it out so that when a person eventually gets to that page, it's easy for them to read, and you can convey what you want to convey by making sure that it starts at one point and then it ends at one point. And for me, one person who I think does that probably better than anyone, in my opinion, is Toriyama with Dragon Ball. I'm serious. If you have not read the Dragon Ball manga, I do highly recommend that you do that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Like Toriyama, he again, like I of all the manga authors that I've read, or out of all the mangas that I've read, no other author has been able to do it like him, where the second you start a page and you know where to start, and it just, like, you can follow everything perfectly. Like you're not confused by where to go at all, and that's for all of Dragon Ball. Like out of I don't think there's a single chapter in Dragon Ball where I've actually had a difficult time reading it. Like I was confused where to look. I don't think that's ever happened. And I honestly can't say the same for other mangakas that I've read. And interestingly enough, that also includes Kishimoto, even though Kishimoto is a fantastic artist, and you cannot say otherwise. Like if you say Kishimoto is a bad artist, that's just a flat out lie. That is just a flat out, objectively false statement. But even he had a few chapters where I had to like look a little bit to try and find out like, okay, where am I supposed to go? Like what direction am I supposed to follow? That does happen. Now, I don't get that as much as I used to, but it did happen every now and then. And I can understand why Kishimoto felt like, you know what? I understand that manga has a certain format that you have to, that you have to follow, but at the same time, like I can't really do what I want to do by following that format 100% of the time. You know what I mean? Like every now and then I'm gonna have to break that rule to like convey the story that I want, the way that I want to. Like for example, what he's doing here with this double page spread of Naruto and Sasuke Sharingan and Rasengan and Chidori clash. Just
Wonderful to see a mangaka 200 chapters into his career still trying to push himself to innovate. But what's interesting about this change compared to the aforementioned mangaka is that Kishimoto's transition is directly influenced by the very thing that's trying to mimic him. That's right, Kishimoto was directly influenced by Naruto's anime's character designer Tetsuya Nishio. He saw some amazing design work coming from Nishio on the anime and loved how it seemed like such a great mix of seinen and shonen styles. He thought it was the ideal art style he'd been looking for, and ever since, he'd been mimicking Nishio's drawings. In a lot of these author notes sections, Kishimoto brings up many famous animators such as Hiroyuki Okiura, who worked on super famous scenes on things like Ghost in the Shell and Akira, which makes me think he's a bit of an animation nut. I mentioned one particular animator who has largely defined what Naruto action is, and that's Norio Matsumoto. Sasuke versus Orochimaru, Rock Lee versus Gaara, Orochimaru versus the third Hokage, and now Naruto versus Sasuke. All these iconic scenes come from this man, and as I've watched those and continued to read, I've noticed Kishimoto's work beginning to resemble the energy and posing found in Matsumoto's work. I can only theorize about his influence here, but given Kishimoto's love of animation, it seems like a safe bet. Having already achieved so much notoriety in the industry with so many people at this point looking up to him, I think it's a great sign of a mangaka and a person to be able to look outward and inward for a means to try and improve himself. It really does seem like the more I learn about Kishimoto as a person, the more I realize how close he is to Naruto as a character. Activity with the assault on the village after being dealt with and the selection of the latest Hokage after being finalized, I was fully expecting this arc to feel like a footnote after everything that's happened.
No.
I was wrong. Despite being one of the longest arcs among the material I've covered so far, the story in question is remarkably simple, which meant that a lot of space was given to this arc's various components to breathe, build up, and climax appropriately. And boy, do they climax appropriately. The first act of this arc is the one that carries most of the heavy lifting from an expository and foundational sense, upon which the rest of the arc launches from comfortably. That said, the rest of this arc consists of a series of fights and chase scenes, and that might not sound interesting, but Kishimoto makes it work really well. Act 1. If I could describe this arc in one word, it would be cathartic and focused. Having come off the back of a rip-roaring couple of arcs with more conflict than you could swing a cat at, going into this I was curious to see the direction Kishimoto was going to take. Sure, we'd have to deal with the aftermath of the attack on the village and Lady Tsunade settling into her new position, but outside of that I didn't see much else to deal with outside of perhaps the Itachi and Sasuke conflict. In the last arc, while I didn't speak much about it, Itachi very much cemented himself as one of the most terrifying major players in the story. As soon as he appeared...
Yeah, see, I was wondering why he didn't mention this in the previous video, and I knew immediately he was gonna save it for this video since it's connected to the person that the arc is kind of revolving around
on the
and
other
named
side
after.
of the door facing Naruto, I sincerely felt the tension and pressure rise, which is exactly the sort of impression you want from a major villain or antagonist. And the action and drama that took fuel from that encounter as Sasuke entered the fray to make the save on Naruto, it felt like a monumental moment in every sense of the word that was building to something. However, then, the rug is pulled from beneath us. Despite the other arcs that make up the rest of this first part of Naruto being somewhat more complex, with a greater number of moving parts, this arc and its 8 volumes primarily concern themselves with Sasuke's relationship with his brother and the choices he makes in seeking revenge in response to that. And I loved it. My biggest complaint after I finished the very first arc of Naruto was that it felt somewhat unfocused. And now in this arc, not only are things incredibly simple, but each facet of this arc now receives ample attention. Sasuke versus Naruto Round 1. Funnily enough, despite being mentioned once before that Sasuke desired to test himself against Naruto, this matchup for one reason or another faded into the back of my subconscious as something I either didn't know I wanted or one that I totally forgot about. And I have no idea why, because on paper these two squaring off makes complete sense and are a terrific matchup narratively speaking. I mentioned before in an earlier video that I felt the closer Naruto came to achieving his goal, the farther away Sasuke would be pushed by his. With Orochimaru having laid that metaphorical Chekhov's gun before us when he said Sasuke needs to seek out more power by embracing the darkness in his heart, I knew a scene or sequence of events would play out like this, and it's so much better than I thought it would be, made possible thanks to some key pieces of symbolism laid out across this series. The initial fight that kicks off this arc's activity is short but punctuated powerfully by a striking visual by really putting into perspective the gap that's appearing between himself and Naruto.
You know, I still remember when I saw this for the first time and I was like, oh, because I remember like when, you know, initially when you see the small indent made by the Rasengan and Sasuke's going all like, ah, look what happened. And then he looks at it and like, oh, like if that hit me, yeah, there's a chance Sasuke would be dead right now. And it just like, it goes on to cement why Sasuke felt so strongly that he needed to do something different, because he looked at Naruto and kept seeing like how quickly he was progressing, and he realized that he hasn't really made a lot of progress, and he just he felt like he just needed something different, because everything he's been doing so far, just while he has gotten stronger, it hasn't gotten him to the point where he needs to the point where he needs to be is what I'm trying to say, in order to face off against Itachi.
However, at this point in the story, I think it's important to point out that their relationship isn't necessarily interesting to me because of their dynamic on its own, and that largely has to do with Kakashi and Jiraiya pretty much telling us explicitly what's happening narratively between them. We're not left to understand this on our own by reading the material and understanding it ourselves, and as a result, this exposition feels clunky and did take away from this short but opening fight between them. Then again, this is a manga for young teens, so
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that, if I'm being honest. I mean, at least to me personally, it didn't really feel clunky. I guess I mean, I can understand how someone can feel that way, because sometimes exposition can feel a little clunky, and that's why like you have to be really careful in your story where you choose to put in exposition, because sometimes it really can feel like, oh, you're putting this because you feel like the audience needs an explanation, when I mean, a lot of the times like people do understand that exposition is there because something needs to be explained for the audience, but it has to be something that the audience like can't really figure out on their own. Like okay, this is where you need to tell them what's going on, because like you need to convey that information, but it has to be done in a way where it feels natural. Like, for example, like, okay, take Lord of the Rings, for example. You could say the exposition character there is Gandalf, and it's understandable why, because Gandalf is like, he's the wizard, he's the old man, he's the wise old man. So it would make sense why he would have knowledge that the other characters don't, or more specifically the hobbits like Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. And you understand why he has to explain it to them because they live their entire lives in the Shire. So while they may have knowledge on some things, they don't know everything, especially about the world that they're in. So Gandalf explaining things to them makes sense, and by explaining it to them, by proxy, he's explaining it to us, the audience. So that's a way where, in my opinion, exposition was actually done well. But there are a lot of times where exposition feels a little clunky because the authors have a character explain something to another character that when you think about it, you realize, wait, there's no reason why this character doesn't already know this. So you realize, oh, they're like, this is an example of clunky exposition. So yeah, I mean, again, like that's I bring that up because I know a lot of people believe that any exposition is just bad, like it's inherently bad. But I don't necessarily agree with that. You know what I mean? So this, for me, again, like it didn't feel clunky to me, at least. Um, like he brought up, you know, Kakashi and Jiraiya, like their conversation where Kakashi explains to him that, you know, Sasuke feels like he is not really progressing at all, even though he actually is. Like he's way stronger at that point than he was at the beginning of the story. But the thing is that he was already like pretty far ahead at that point. So the jump from where he was then to where he is now isn't really as much of a leap as Naruto at the beginning of the story to where he is now. So to, like, he even says it himself, to Sasuke, it seems like Sasuke is just standing still, even though that's actually not the case. Like he would have realized that if he just took a moment to step back and think about where he was before, he'll realize that he actually did progress. But he was still affected by by his confrontation with Itachi, and Itachi basically reminding him what happened that night and messing with him. And yeah, it just that moment did completely screw with Sasuke's head, and it does explain why he acts the way he acts, because a lot of people do believe that Sasuke was kind of acting irrationally, but I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense. So sorry, that was a long tangent for something that was a small part of the video. Let's move on ahead.
I'm gonna let it slide. I will, however, say what I did really enjoy was the role mentors are playing in this story. Whether that be Kakashi and Sasuke, which I will definitely speak about more later, Jiraiya's relationship with Naruto as I've described in the past, Sakura's new budding relationship with Lady Tsunade, and of course, Guy's relationship with Rock Lee. Rock Lee's been an interesting character in this story. From the moment I met him back during the Chunin exams, I knew I liked this little guy. With him time and time again throughout the story, whether it be in the Force of Death, the fight with Gaara, or his rehabilitation after that fight, he sort of, in a way, stood as an example of what a hero with a similar mentality to that of Naruto might appear like if he didn't have an all-powerful spirit trapped within him. When Naruto, in the first half of this story, contended with inadequacy and a chip on his shoulder, eventually Kishimoto was forced to transition his character from one that struggled to make a difference to one who had to deal with the high expectations from those around him. Lee, on the other hand, because of the lack of advantages he has compared to Naruto, can fully lean into and embrace angles an outcast character like Naruto once was afforded. Naruto can self-heal thanks to the fox spirit inside him, and so a natural way to explore Lee's character to further distinguish him from Naruto is to have him absorb a tremendous amount of damage and the consequences
And he
of that
has to suffer the consequences of that fight.
Guy. In many ways, the mentor characters in this story mirror key attributes of their students' personalities. Guy is perhaps the most pronounced variation on this concept. Everything from his appearance to his desire to prove himself against Kakashi to his soul-destroying training exercises. In every sense of the word, the connection between Guy and Lee is as powerful as it is because they feel like father and son. Once again providing Lee in this story horrific odds for anyone to have to face, let alone a young teenager. I spoke about Guy before in a prior part, saying that I thought he saw a tremendous amount of himself in Lee, and due to that, sees him as something of an inspiration to even him. And while that was true, in this arc, their relationship is tested as Guy comes face to face with the consequences of the path he laid this young boy down. And so he's faced with a dilemma. Does he encourage him like he always had, to look the odds in the eye unblinking and take the surgery which has a 50% mortality rate? Or does he choose to discourage him out of sympathy for his situation? It's a tremendous amount of responsibility, and it's a fascinating character study within this arc that I think has the most emotional resonance.
You know, I think he's about to, but I do want to say this real quick. I think that for me personally, this is a very underrated part of the story, and one that I actually don't really see a lot of people talking about in the fandom. And I'm gonna say something here that I think is probably not gonna win me any favors with a lot of fans, but I I feel like Kishimoto should have had Lee make the decision not to take the surgery. And I'll explain why. I feel like it would have been a little bit more impactful if Lee didn't take the surgery, because, you know, as much as he wants to be a shinobi, like, he realizes that, or he basically learns from his mistake that he did before, where he wanted to prove himself so much that he ended up basically risking his life or risking his body. And that's what he did in his fight against Gaara. And now or I can talk. Look where it got him. Okay, look at where he is now. And I feel like if he had made the decision not to take the surgery, even when Tsunade basically adjusted to where there's a higher than 50% chance that he'll survive, I feel like he should still decide not to, because it'll show that he's learned, like, yes, I want to go back to being a shinobi. I want to prove to people that even if you're someone like me and you're born with no talent for ninjutsu or genjutsu, you can still be a great shinobi, but it's not worth risking my life. Like, I'm not going to make the same mistake I did before, because that's how I got into the situation in the first place. And I feel like it would have just been so much more effective is what I meant to say. So much more effective than how the story originally went. And that's kind of like, if I had to knock the Sasuke retrieval arc for one thing, it would be this. It's the, like, kind of lack of consequences is what I'm trying to say. Because if you think about it, like, there are characters who make decisions that you would think would have consequences, like Choji taking the red pill, which he was specifically told, if you take that, it will kill you. And then Neji, of course, fighting Kimimaru, or no, I think it was, no, Kidomaru, excuse me. Sorry, I always get those two names confused. It's Kidomaru, the spider guy. And originally you think, okay, well, that's it. He's dead. And then, of course, the end of the arc shows up, and no, it turns out they both survived, which for me is just, it lessened the impact of those moments. Like, I feel like if they had, if both Choji and Neji died, and then Lee decided not to take the surgery, like, it would have showed you that characters' decisions in this story have consequences. And it's not that they don't, but for me, like, it just, that's the one thing that I didn't like about the Sasuke retrieval arc, is that there was, like, kind of like, there weren't really any consequences to a lot of the decisions that characters made. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of wish that he didn't do that. And I don't know if Kishimoto did that because he felt like if he did, then the arc would have been a little bit too dark. Like, maybe people would have complained, like, okay, so wait, Lee is now not going to be a shinobi, Neji's dead, Choji's dead, and Naruto failed to bring Sasuke back, so the mission failed. Like, that's kind of depressing. And while I understand that, again, I just feel like it would have been so much more impactful. And, like, hopefully it could be like what Kishimoto is trying to show us, the audience, is that in this universe, like, yeah, things can go badly, missions can go badly, people can die, and yes, you can fail, and it would have all been for nothing. And this arc could have been like a way to show us that. And but it could still have a hopeful ending. Like, you can still do that ending with Naruto where he says, you know, I'm not going to give up, and I'm still going to keep moving forward, and I'm going to get stronger, and I am going to bring Sasuke back. I'm not going back on my promise to Sakura. And like, you could have still had that, and it could have showed you that, you know, yes, things can go badly, and you can either let it affect you, or you can choose to move past it. You can choose to move forward. So that's just what I want to say about that. Right. So here comes the
premium brand at half the price, then Raycon's everyday earbuds are exactly what you need. They've got a super slick rubber oil look and feel that, at least to me, look pretty damn great and match their premium sound. With a whole bunch of gel tips available, they've always got a perfect in-ear fit too. I've been using mine for several months now and they've quickly become the best earbuds I've ever owned. Whether I'm just out and about walking my dogs or sat at home writing videos like these, they've got me covered. With a built-in mic, I can take calls at the press of a button and even leave voice memos for myself. The fact it's got 8 hours of constant playtime and a 32-hour battery life means they're always ready to go whenever I need them. If you're interested, click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/notmark to unlock exclusive deals up to 20% off your Raycon order. With a 45-day happiness guarantee, if you don't love them, you can send them right back.
Eu sou Naruto Uzumaki. Faça parte da minha jornada ninja. Seja meu aliado agora. Acesse narutoonline.tv. Acesse os golpes, lute com coragem, torne-se Hokage assim como eu. Totalmente grátis.
The scene where Sasuke chooses to leave to connect with the dark side is actually a lot more effective than I thought it would be. It's certainly not profound or anything like that, but it really does feel authentic and honest to the characters involved, which is the most important thing. In this scene, Sakura tries her best to persuade Sasuke to stay with them, and in doing so pours her heart out in a tender, albeit awkward scene, which I honestly thought was appropriate and, well, perfect. They are just kids after all, struggling to navigate the minefield that is expressing how they feel about each other while under extreme stress with little practice in that area. And it absolutely came across that way. I really did feel sorry for Sakura during this part, and while I don't vibe too much with her as a character, I did think this felt very authentic and appropriate for her. And following Sasuke leaving, the foundation is now set for the chase that will follow that day, with none other than Shikamaru, now a Chunin, being tasked with assembling a team. Interestingly, while Naruto was the obvious choice and is chosen to be part of that team, Neji, Kiba, and Choji were less expected by me, but absolutely welcomed in my mind. The chase that eventually gets underway I thought was brilliant. While there was a little bit of a slow burn towards the middle, I definitely thought the attention given to the fights really helped the pacing, as well as elevate the various characters that otherwise didn't get the attention they deserved earlier in this story. Shikamaru, while having been given some shine in prior arcs, now leads the group of young ninja with an impressive and strategic fashion that absolutely highlighted not only his upside as a leader and strategist, but when things didn't go 100% to plan with his group's numbers dwindling, it also led him to question himself, wondering if he was good enough, which, for such a certain and calculated character, really helped to humanize him in a way I wasn't expecting, grounding him while also exhibiting his greatest strengths and techniques. And really, that's what this middle section does exceptionally well. It helps to re-establish these lesser known and seldom focused on characters, offers them the chance to show their absolute best and shows their internal struggles and doubts. The way this chase is organized, it acts as a sort of conga line, for lack of a better term, of Orochimaru's goons to get through, and so, one after another, part of Shikamaru's team has to drop off to fight each member of this group as they continue to carry Sasuke off in a basket for Orochimaru to take the body of. Choji's fight is first, and honestly, when I look at Neji's and Kiba's alongside this, I thought this one did it best. The rest follow a very similar format to this, and so on top of it benefiting from being the first time we see this sort of sequence and format, I think there's a lot more we can dig into with this material, seeing as Neji, for example, already had an emotionally charged fight with Naruto during the Chunin exams that dealt with much of the same subject matter discussed in this fight specifically.
Man, I still thought this fight was good.
Choji has this. So I guess Kishimoto took a leaf out of One Piece's playbook and gave Choji rumble balls. And man, does he get massive during this. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect with this, but once again, similar to what made Shikamaru effective during this section, the conflict Choji endures serves as a great vehicle to demonstrate his skills that make him unique, but it also highlights his insecurities and shortcomings as a ninja and a human being too. I think out of all the fights in this section, Choji's was by far my favorite. And while I was reading through this material too, I was shocked by how fast I was flying through it. The fights in this section felt both compelling and brief, with the likes of Choji and Neji receiving plenty of wonderful two-page spreads while also demonstrating these Sound Ninja's second forms, acting as a foreshadowing of things to come for Sasuke. I thought the second form designs the Sound Ninjas brandish were phenomenal. I wasn't so sure about them each getting a new transformation at first though. I thought the effect would get lessened each and every time with it being more and more formulaic. But in actuality, because the designs were so great, I actually ended up getting hyped for what they would eventually look like when they did change. Furthermore, once Naruto and Shikamaru's respective fights get underway, then the tempo really starts to ramp up, particularly when it comes to Naruto's fight with this strange new character coming to take the basket housing Sasuke away. Naruto assumes that feral mode he slips into when his friends are in danger, and the artwork accompanying it is appropriately awesome. However, things as they often do during stories go to shit, and when they did here, something amazing happened.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Lee fucking arrives to make the same. I'm not sure if my energy in this recording will accurately show just how excited I felt when he showed up, but I went bananas because honestly I love this little character. I spoke about how the last few volumes and fights really felt somewhat
Just kind of a shame it didn't really go anywhere. I mean, it was cool, but I mean, and yeah, the drunken Lee was pretty fucking cool, but yeah, I guess yeah, it kind of goes back to what I said before, where I guess I just kind of just, you know what, I'm not gonna repeat myself here, but you have to admit it didn't really go anywhere, like, and especially later on in part 2, like Kishimoto didn't really do anything with the character. So it's like, I mean, if you weren't gonna do anything, then why did you just yeah,
thrown right out the window and replaced with the pure chaos Lee has injected into this fight. However, as things want to go in this story, we can't have too much of a good thing for too long. But that doesn't mean what we receive as a replacement isn't great also.
This was a really cool moment, and this fight between them I also think is very underrated. Like, I do kind of wish more people would talk about the fight between Gaara and Kimimaro.
At the beginning of Volume 24, Kishimoto reminisced about his experience reading Dragon Ball Volume 24 for the first time and how that was where Goku fought against Ginyu. He described the affair as something he was massively excited to read through and hoped that he could make Naruto more exciting. When I opened that volume after reading nothing but what felt like quite safe choices up until now, this volume exploded with interest, near impossible to predict matchups, and last-minute saves, like the fight with Lee and his drunken monkey technique, which was hilarious and surprisingly effective against the worsening odds right after his surgery. And then Gaara and the other Sand Ninjas show up. I'm not even remotely kidding here. It's felt like more has happened in the last 5 chapters than there has been in the last 4 volumes. It's honestly brilliant stuff. Kimimaro is a brilliant looking villain, and his fight against Lee and eventually Gaara is brilliantly handled. He is one of the most unsettling and awesome looking ninjas I've come across in this story. And when he whipped out his spine and used it as a sword, I was like, okay, look, I know I'm not a big fan of action only moments, but that was really friggin' cool. This fight is honestly not one I would ever have thought to create if left to my own devices, but the 2 powers on display here, sand manipulation and bone manipulation, created perhaps the most visually stunning battle sequence I've seen from this manga to date. Defensively, offensively, and the strategy employed by both warriors was enough to win my heart a million times over. And throwing Lee into the mix only served to exacerbate that feeling for me. Watching these 2 one-time enemies work together and in a sense save each other was immensely satisfying. And we're not done yet. There are moments in pop culture where you have to sit back and recognize that this was a moment not only pivotal to the story that it takes part in.
So I'm gonna ask you guys, how many of you guys remember this? Remember the old format of YouTube? God damn, it's been long fucking.
But one that has influenced and impacted the lives of millions around the world. For me, that moment was Goku versus Vegeta. It was the very first piece of material I ever saw of Dragon Ball, and because of the impact that had on my life, I've gone on to make it my career. And this fight, Sasuke versus Naruto, this really and truly felt like the culmination of the entire series. Conveyed perfectly by Kishimoto, as the strengths Naruto has garnered across his time spent with us are all used here to full effect. From his most bombastic and ostentatious abilities like the Shadow Clones and the Rasengan, all the way to the more subtle touches like when he learned to walk on water with Jiraiya. All of these skills are on display here and used to full effect, serving to heighten the drama and make this feel like we've reached a significant endpoint. What did catch me off guard, however, was that a massive portion of this fight is spent in flashback. A brilliant flashback, but it surprised me nevertheless. The flashback for Sasuke, while long, added so much to an occasion that felt as though it was starved of Sasuke's perspective. We got to see the decaying of Sasuke's relationship with his brother and the origins of his entire purpose in life: to get revenge. But one thing I will say about this before I move on is that I get the feeling that we're missing a large part of this story, namely Itachi's perspective on everything. Now, it might very well just turn out to be the case that he's a cold-blooded murderer that has no redeemable qualities, but who knows? I'll see how that plays out in the future.
So who wants to tell him? And also, oh, okay, perfect. So I've always wondered why they did this in the anime. Like, they drew the Itachi's Mangekyo looking like this, but it doesn't look like this. Like, even in the manga, like it looked like it's supposed to. Like, it's like kind of like it's kind of hard to say that, but you guys know what Itachi's Mangekyo looks like. But I've always wondered why they drew it like this. It always confused me.
Concerning the fight itself, the action in the opening minutes felt appropriately shocking and confusing due to Naruto's perspective. However, once the flashback
and also, yeah, he brought up Itachi's perspective, which of course is gonna come into play later on.
revealing Sasuke's motivations and full backstory concluded, the fight suddenly felt both appropriate for each respective character and, most importantly, perfectly focused. The paneling and layout work by Kishimoto, as I mentioned earlier with the Gaara and Rock Lee encounter, is some of the best in the series, with Kishimoto really demonstrating how far he's come as an artist, going from strength to strength, leading to Naruto charging up his Rasengan and Sasuke his Chidori, with the paneling accompanying this being stronger than anywhere else I've seen in the manga. There's a point of view shot from underwater as we look on as these two ninjas dance on the water's surface, with their weapons floating down to the dark depths beneath, and that might be my favorite page out of the entire conflict here. However, if I want to take a step back for a second and think about things more abstractly, it is my belief that the flashback we get after this concerning Kakashi's origins holds a lot more meaning behind it than might be evident at first glance. In this flashback, Kakashi's team is composed of three individuals: himself, a young boy called Obito Uchiha, and a girl called Rin. And from this reflection on his early training days, we can see why perhaps he's taken a keen interest in Sasuke, taking him under his wing, seeking to teach him the Chidori technique. Of that original group, Obito was clearly the overly emotional underachiever like Naruto was in Sasuke's group, while Rin could be a very convincing stand-in for Sakura, given that Sakura herself would begin studying the same jutsu Rin was. However, while reading this material, I couldn't help but cast my mind back to the first arc where Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura sat before Kakashi. In that very scene, Sasuke explained in no uncertain terms what his goals were, demonstrating his single-minded approach in becoming a ninja, and over the course of that story, this focus has remained. And with the farther and farther he pursued that line of thinking, Kakashi began getting more and more interested and involved in Sasuke's life, and I think there's a reason for it. He saw himself in Sasuke. Kakashi's flashback, wherein we first see him use the Chidori technique, he does so not taking into account how his actions will affect his teammates. Single-minded also in his goal, he ends up failing in that effort for the most part, and later in that same flashback, Rin gets kidnapped. Obito wants to rescue her, but Kakashi insists on completing the mission instead. Thankfully, the comparatively weaker Obito convinces Kakashi to save her too, and from this, it's clear to see the similarities Kakashi sees in Sasuke, particularly striking for Kakashi given that he lost a close friend in the process of that mission. It's a touching flashback highlighting the origins of his eye, but for me, it highlighted instead the birth of who Kakashi is today. By the end of that sequence, the Chidori becomes a technique not exclusively of destruction, but one that instead represents protection of his closest loved ones, which recontextualized every instance he used that move in the series for me. However, if we are to think about this one layer deeper, his teaching of this technique to Sasuke with his explicit explanation of when to use this technique, it effectively acts as Kakashi handing Sasuke a representation of one's desire to protect what's most important to him, hoping that it will become that for him, to help him see what's actually important, to focus on what you have right now instead of what you lost. And so, when this story climaxes in the emphatic and grand fashion it does, Naruto's Rasengan explodes on contact with Sasuke's Chidori to create a stunning inferno of a spectacle, no doubt, but it's also a collision of two techniques that offer snapshots of how far one has come and how far astray the other has fallen. The act and display of these techniques alone perfectly tell the story of these two fierce characters in a very real and metaphorical sense, with the technique that was designed to protect those close to you very literally being used in this instance to tear down the one closest to Sasuke. This arc wears many different masks.
So, sorry, before he moves forward, I just want to comment on this real quick. I did like that he brought up you know, the Kakashi flashback, because it like, this is something that you if you think about it, you do notice, like, for example, let me see if I can find it right here.
Sasuke and Sakura sat before Kakashi. In that very scene, Sasuke explained in no uncertain terms what his goals were, demonstrating, and with the farther and farther
this moment right here.
line of thinking,
Wait.
Kakashi began
This moment right here. I don't know. I think I remember talking about this a little bit in a previous video, but for me personally, I really do like this moment because you realize that Kakashi and Sasuke were actually a lot more alike than you originally thought. Not just because, you know, Sharingan and Chidori. It's not that, but like, Sasuke right now is a lot like how Kakashi used to be when he was a kid, which again he brought up in this video is why he probably felt like he needed to take him under his wing, because he didn't want Sasuke to continue being like he was before, because he remembers what happened. Like, his attitude nearly, or no, not nearly, but it did end up, at least he thought at the time, ended up getting a friend killed, and he wanted to make sure that Sasuke doesn't have that mindset, which is why, of course, he ended up teaching him the Chidori to make sure that he has the power he needs to protect his friends. And if you think about it, like, Kishimoto has never had Sasuke kill anyone with the Chidori. Like, no, seriously, think about it. Like, Sasuke has never killed anyone using it. I mean, like, do those samurai count in the 5 Kage arc? Because, I mean, technically he ran Chidori through his sword, so I guess technically he did, but in any meaningful way, like, he tried to kill Naruto, he failed, or that didn't happen. Next time he tried to kill Itachi with it, that never happened. He tried to kill the Raikage, that didn't happen. Yeah, like, and later on he tries to kill Naruto again, and of course he failed there. Like, Sasuke has never successfully killed anyone using the Chidori, and if you think about it, neither did Kakashi. Or no, sorry, he did. Like, he ended up killing Haku, but that was because Haku stepped in front of it, and he also killed some of those ninja from the I think they were from the Stone Village, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, Kishimoto did say that Kakashi invented the Chidori, or he taught Sasuke the Chidori to have the power he needs to protect his friend, not use it to attack his friend. And so I guess it doesn't make sense that Kishimoto stayed with that, because Sasuke has never been able to, like, kill his friends using the Chidori. And I always thought that was interesting, like, interesting bit of symbolism from Kishimoto. And again, I do love that he drew parallels between Kakashi and Sasuke. And I do wonder if other people, I'm sure other, nothing else. All right, where were we?
Instead of what you lost. And so, when this story climaxes in the emphatic and grand fashion it does, Naruto's Rasengan explodes on contact with Sasuke's Chidori to create a stunning inferno of a spectacle, no doubt, but it's also a collision of two techniques that offer snapshots of how far one has come and how far astray the other has fallen. The act and display of these techniques alone perfectly tell the story of these two fierce characters in a very real and metaphorical sense, with the technique that was designed to protect those close to you very literally being used in this instance to tear down the one closest to Sasuke. This arc wears many different masks. It's a character-driven drama, it's a comedy, it's action, and it's a thriller. But in the end, this has become a story about two characters more than anything else. And in the end, Naruto's first part ends in tragedy. Or does it? The choice Sasuke made to not kill Naruto says more about his character than this entire fight ever could. And it's rather fitting that a technique like Chidori couldn't be used to end the life of his friend. Overall, my impressions of this arc and really this first section of Naruto is a wonderful one. While it didn't start strong like many other series do, Kishimoto, and by extension this story, has a passion behind it that, much like its titular character, grew and grew more effective with each subsequent arc. I've transformed from someone that didn't know the first thing about Naruto, and now I consider myself a massive fan of Kishimoto and the work he's produced here with this section of the story. The arc was a massive finale befitting of the occasion that managed to also feel intimate at the same time. I can't wait to see where the story goes from here, and I honestly hope you guys will join me for the ride. But before we wrap things up, I want to quickly plug a really cool podcast I was on. Amazon Prime Video has put together an anime podcast called Anime to Z, hosted by rapper Shay Lingo and comedian Beck Hill. They had me on to review the Vinland Saga anime, so if you're interested in my thoughts on that show, my episode will be out tomorrow as of this video's upload. I'll drop a link in the description for anyone who wants to check it out. Subscribe if you want to see more when I start reading Shippuden next week, but until then, I've been Toy Not Mark, and thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, because I don't want to risk the music possibly getting the video blocked. But yeah, so there you go. I mean, look, I mean he did bring up a lot of interesting points, and again, I'm really happy he brought up the parallels between Kakashi and Sasuke, because again, that's another thing that I don't really see a lot of people talking about in the fandom. And I always loved that what Kishimoto did there, like Kakashi trying to make sure that Sasuke doesn't end up, like him, where his dismissal of his comrades could end up leading to one of them or both of them, dying. And it does make sense why he, chooses to focus on him more so than Naruto and Sasuke, because that's something I do remember a lot of people kind of giving Kakashi, a lot of crap for, because, they say, oh, you showed favoritism to Sasuke, you didn't really train, Sakura or Naruto. And while, yeah, I do agree he could have, focused a bit more attention on them, but I mean, you got to remember, like, Kakashi was even told by Jiraiya himself, like, look, you focus on Sasuke, teach him to use his Sharingan, and I'll focus on teaching Naruto. So, I mean, if Jiraiya himself is telling you, like, I'll take this kid under my wing and I'll teach him, I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to say no? So, yeah, I mean, again, it does make sense when you think about it. I feel like this is one of those things where a lot of people initially, like, crapped on it, but then when you sit down and actually think about it, you realize, oh, it actually does make a lot of sense. Like, Kishimoto did actually have a thought process behind it, as opposed to it just being something that he accidentally did. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, remember to leave a like, share this video, subscribe if you haven't, make sure to click the bell for notifications, comment down below with your thoughts. All those things really help out videos with the YouTube algorithm, because the algorithm sure as hell isn't going to help us. So that's why we need you guys. So that's why we need you guys' help to push videos in the algorithm. And make sure to check the description, as always, guys, for links to this video, as well as a link to Totally Not Mark's channel. Make sure you head on over there, and make sure you head on over there, subscribe to him, and watch his videos, and show him your support. And I hope I'll see you guys for my next reaction, which should be part 5. Bye for now.